This is Matthew, host of the Superhero Ethics Podcast, and I've got an ethical question for you. If I'm trying to help you not listen to ads, is it ethical for me to do an ad to help you do that? If you go to our website, theethicalpanda.com, and just click on the join button, for $5 a month, $55 a year, you get to hear all of our episodes without ads. Was I ethical in doing this? Let me know. Hello and welcome to this episode of Superhero Ethics. I'm coming to you from the People's Republic of Minneapolis, where we are currently under siege by ICE forces. And if you're like, why in the hell are we talking about politics so early on? Friends, that's why we're talking about this today. I'm here with Jessica Plummer. We're in a moment of kind of national crisis, not just because of what's happening in Minneapolis, but it's the current moment. And as you well know, comic books, movies, TV shows, all this stuff has always been a reflection of what's happening in the real world. And people love to talk about what would superheroes do in different situations. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about how would the heroes, how would the villains that we love and we love to hate and all that, think about what's happening right now in Minneapolis, in the United States, in Venezuela, in possibly Greenland, just all around the world. It's myself, Matthew. I'm here with Jessica Plummer. Jessica, how are we doing today?
As well as I can be, given, as you said, we are in crisis.
Yeah. I was away for a couple of days, but it's not abated. We do still have snow here, but more importantly, the ice is still here. My child's daycare has had people show up at it. Happily, the daycare owner was happy to be like, nope, I'm going to give you our name and our identification number, and that's it. It's not part of the fraud nonsense, but just, they just want to harass people. We have had workers who go there who haven't been showing up. But obviously, well beyond that, it has brought tragedy to the families. It has brought tragedy to the families of Renee Good and Keith Porter, and just kind of screwed up a whole bunch of things. And where do we want to begin? Your favorite is Superman, and what do you think Superman, the immigrant himself, would think of all of this?
Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot since you proposed the topic. And, I think one of the things that makes this a difficult question to answer is, with a few notable exceptions, superheroes exist in this weird space where they try to be literal social justice warriors while being somehow apolitical, as if, fighting for justice, like you have to define what justice means, right? Like what are you fighting for? And Superman in particular, Superman and Captain America are the two big ones here, are often less, when people talk about what they would do in a given situation, it's less about what's in character given the character's actual history in various media, and more what the person speaking feels. So like I can tell you what I think that my Superman would do, but I am sure that there are plenty of ICE agents who think that Superman would be, I don't know, throwing on a mask and harassing brown people, I guess. That's never happened in a comic, but sure, you can think that. But yeah, like you said, Superman is literally an undocumented immigrant. He is a refugee of a world that was destroyed in almost every version of events because people would not listen to someone saying, hey, we're destroying our world. He is a journalist who believes in the truth. His tagline since the 40s, one of his taglines has been champion of the oppressed. So yeah, I think Superman would be very opposed to what's happening in Minneapolis and across the country.
Yeah, across the country and across the world. And I'm glad you brought up Captain America, because for me, one thing I always wrestled with in terms of Superman, and to some extent Captain America, though I knew very little of him. This is when I was, years ago, before I really, the Marvel.
Pre the MCU.
Really, MCU and all that. Is they were both these representations of America. And Superman, I now can understand like that they've moved away from that, but he was truth, justice, and the American way. And Captain
Yeah.
America is literally there in the name. And I've never been a real rah rah, go United States. I came up in the '80s when Reagan was invading every South American country he could figure out a way to do so. Um, but I think what really kind of struck me was when I came to understand that in many of their versions, and I kind of like what you said at the beginning about how, like, at the end, this is just, there's no one definitive Superman, there's no one definitive Captain America. People can find their interpretations. We'll talk about Punisher in a bit, because there, at least the author specifically said, no, when ICE agents and police and stuff like that think Punisher's on their side, they're wrong. But we don't have that with Superman. But certainly, the number of versions in which I've seen both of them have this attitude of, it's not that I support the American government right or wrong. It's that I support the ideals that America proposes that it stands for. And in a way, I think, like, I don't know if this is true of you, but I certainly grew up with some of that, and in the '80s, kind of a lot of it kind of streaked away. But I have some sympathy for the idea of, losing that mythology. And I've come to really see both of them as characters who are saying, like, that sometimes the most American thing you can do is to stand up to the own American government and say, you are failing to live up to truth and justice and the American way, or, however you phrase it. Is that kind of the way you see those two characters as well?
Yeah, well, I would say more Captain America than
Uh-huh.
Superman. Because the other thing about Superman is that
Mm-hmm.
he's changed a lot over
Oh,
the
sure,
course
yeah.
of his existence. So when he was first created, he was very much like a populist rabble rouser who was constantly fighting corrupt politicians and
Yeah.
general corruption and exposing
In episode 1, he fights
wrongdoing.
a landlord who's taking
Yeah.
advantage of his immigrant tenants.
Yeah, he's fighting landlords, he's fighting abusive orphanage owners, he's
Mm-hmm.
fighting abusive prison wardens, he's fighting uh, domestic abusers, like anybody who is using their power, again, champion of the oppressed, anyone who's
Right.
using their power to harm those who are um, in under that power, like he is stepping in to stop that, no matter how big or small the scale of it. And in like that shifts a bit in World War II, and he becomes much more patriotic. And then in the 50s, it really shifts, and he becomes this
Mm.
very staid, patriarchal figure who really is about maintaining uh,
Right.
law and order. And we can talk about like the comics code, and there's a lot going on in
Mm-hmm.
McCarthyism. Like there's a lot going on there, and that's not really what our discussion is about. But with Superman, you can point to different moments in his history and you can say, well, he made this decision here, he made that decision here, because the politics that were guiding the people making the comics changed, and the
Right.
way he was being presented as a character changed. That, as far as I understand, is not really the case with Captain America. And I'm not nearly as well versed in Captain America as I am in Superman. But you have
Let me
like
actually pause for a second to ask a little bit more about Superman.
yeah,
So, where did the phrase "truth, justice, and the American way" come about? Was that in the '50s and the kind of the rah-rah patriotism? Was that from the beginning?
World War II. It was not
Okay.
right from the beginning. It came in, it was part of the radio show introduction and not the original. I don't remember the exact phrasing of it. There is specific phrasing that was more like fighting for truth, justice, and I think it might have been tolerance. Like it was
Oh wow.
different.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the US entered the war and it became the American way, because like it was very much a wartime patriotism thing. And then it went away actually for a bit
Right.
after the war. And then it came back, which I do think it came back in the 50s during
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
McCarthy era, I think, but I would have to double check that.
And if I'm right, like he had that American way thing. His colors were red, white, and blue, and all. But we never actually saw him fighting the communists, right? Like that. I don't think of that as part of his history. Or were there?
It's one of those things where like comics during the Cold War, especially like the 50s and 60s, there's a lot of like, there's never anything specific about Russia or the
Right.
USSR. There's never anything, they're very vague. There's a lot of fictional countries, and there's a lot of like whatever wackiness is going on in the comic turns out to be because of the machinations of a foreign spy with a really heavy Russian accent, but like it's
Right.
never like from the country of Moldova, like that you
Right.
or like they'll come up with a made up country or whatever, or they won't name, often they just don't name a country. They're like from a foreign power, and
Right.
it's not subtle. Um, but yeah, it's not really explicit because it didn't have to be explicit. Everybody knew. And then as you move into the 70s and 80s, like the way that we interpreted the Cold War changed, and the way that the
Right.
comics interpreted the Cold War changed very significantly. And it became a much more complicated
Right.
and nuanced conversation, because of Vietnam and so on.
All that. Okay, so with that taken care of, now let's definitely talk about Captain America.
Right. So Captain America, again, like I said, I'm less well versed in Captain America than I am in Superman, but it's my understanding that he has been much more consistent as a character. Like you have the original World War II flavor Captain America, who is, he's fighting Nazis, pretty straightforward. But then from the moment he comes out of the ice, he's very much, he's sort of a man out of time. And I mean, he is like, that's the catchphrase that they use for him. And a big part of that is him taking stock of where the country that he knows he is meant to represent is now, and like trying to reconcile that against the values that he believes in. And that is an explicit part of his characterization in a way that it's not for Superman, because slogan aside, he's not actually meant to represent America.
Right.
He just happens to be American, whereas Captain America is wrapped in the flag and it's in his name. And like there's a storyline, I think from the 70s, where possibly the early 80s, where he gets so like fed up with and dismayed by what's going on that he quits being Captain America and he becomes a superhero nomad, and he has a really stupid costume and people mostly make fun of it. But like this is inherent in the character. He's a character who, if you don't know anything about comics, like I remember maybe a year or two ago, I saw like a poll. It wasn't like a political survey or anything, like actual professional polling. It was like a Facebook poll, but people were saying what they thought the political leanings of various superheroes were. And Captain America was down there as a Republican, and it was like, okay, nobody answering this knows anything about Captain America, because if you don't know anything about Captain America, you're like, oh, he's this old stodgy guy in a flag. Sure, he's a Republican. But I mean, you just have to watch the Civil War movie, let alone read the comics, to see that no, he questions things. Or Winter Soldier, like he's deeply troubled by the things that our government is doing, and he doesn't just say, well, it's probably okay because it's the American government.
Right. I think that's part of what makes his story so important. And
yes.
I recently rewatched Winter Soldier, and in that one, they make it about S.H.I.E.L.D., and S.H.I.E.L.D. is run by this international group, so it kind of makes it less of a specific thing about America, but it's that same thing, and you can see all the way back to the Avengers movie, of him having this fight with Nick Fury where he's slowly losing faith. And I feel like in many ways that is such an important story for people right now because the journey of coming to understand, like, no, this is not the country that we were all promised it was, and we were told. And again, this can get into a much larger political science conversation, because I certainly don't want to, like, I think one view of this could be, oh, America totally lived up to all of those promises until 2016 or until 2024. Clearly that's not the case. I think there are ways in which we've never lived up to those promises, but at times have been working towards them. and at times not. And but yeah, I think it's such a powerful part of his story, Captain America, of being willing to say like that's that the American ideal isn't necessarily the American government, and sometimes it can even be standing up to your own government, to your own agency, to whatever it is, because the ideal is what matters.
Absolutely. There's also I just remembered, again, another really important Captain America story was written in the aftermath of Watergate. And the writer
Oh,
was
really?
real upset because that was a deeply scarring moment for the country back when, you know, a
Mm-hmm.
president committing crimes had consequences.
Who knew?
What
Who knew? Strange idea.
what a dream world they lived in. But there is a story in which, like, it's a long story where Captain America is fighting an evil organization called the Secret Empire, and at the end of the story he discovers that the secret leader of the Secret Empire is the president of the United States, who is not
Oh, wow.
shown or named, but who then commits suicide just off panel rather than like
Right.
face. Right. And like,
Mm-hmm.
the writer was working through some
Working through
stuff,
some things, yeah.
which or there's that line which it comes, I believe, from the original Civil War comic, and they took it from the
Mm-hmm.
movie, where that great, I don't always love the context that it's said in, but it's that great line from Steve where he says, when all the world is telling you to move, it's your job to plant yourself like a tree beside the river of truth and say, no, you move. Which, like, I'm getting chills. Like, it's such a good line. And you plant yourself like a tree besides the river of truth, like besides the
Right.
thing that is right and true, not what you are told to do.
Right. It's funny because people on here know that I've had trouble with him saying that line in that movie because I think that there's both, it is an incredibly important statement, and yet the number of people who do that without realizing that they're not actually planting themselves by the river of truth, and then it becomes very dangerous for that reason. But no, it is still, I think, a very important statement and idea, and it echoes. I think I think it was Gandhi who said there's some line about like speak the truth even if your voice is wavering and even if the whole world is speaking against you. As
Yeah.
long as you're speaking the truth.
Yeah.
I'm totally mangling the line, but same kind of idea. And you're right. I think there's something very powerful in that. So those are the two easiest ones, I think, in some ways.
I have another
Oh, go
easy
ahead.
one.
Okay, go for it.
I feel like the X-Men are really easy, and I feel like
Yeah,
pretty universally they're like, they disagree on a lot, but I feel like they'd be pretty firmly in lockstep with this one.
yeah. I mean, I think that's like right now. I will say right now here in Minneapolis, there's a lot of conversation about how we should be reacting to this, and there's a lot of we need to be nonviolent and we need to hold to those ideals,
Mm.
and there's a lot of people who are starting to bring guns and they're not threatening anyone; they're being defensive. And I feel like there'd probably be some like Professor X Magneto debate on
Sure.
what are we going to do to these ICE agents and stuff like that, with Magneto wanting to be a little more on the aggressive side. But yeah, I think the X-Men as a whole would be pretty against all this.
Yeah. Tactics they would differ on.
Exactly.
Uh General opinion, I think they'd be pretty
Mm-hmm.
much there's always like a handful of weaselly mutants who are like Sebastian Shaw or like Toad or whoever, who are
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't care, let me just get mine. But we're not talking about
Yeah.
that. We're talking about the actual X-Men.
Yeah. And much as I dislike Cyclops, even I will admit that he gets tagged as the Law and Order guy a little too much. Even he, I think, would not be
Oh no,
on the side of
Cyclops
this.
would be in the streets with his laser eyes, like
Mm-hmm.
hardcore.
Yeah.
I've been reading X-Men comics, and we can have a whole episode about Cyclops because I actually
Let's
have
do it.
discovered that I really like him.
Okay, let's do it. Let's do it. Um, so let's get away from the easy ones, and I think we could come up with a lot of different people who would be against all of this, and we will come up with more and talk about why. Who are people in the superpowered world, especially maybe even heroes, who you think could be on the side of what's happening?
I have a hard time coming up with a character who would be okay with what's happening and stay okay, who is unequivocally a hero.
That's fair. That's fair.
I can think of characters who might, at the start of the imaginary story we're telling, be like, well, like Law and Order, blah, blah, blah. And then as things, deteriorate, are like, wait, this has gone too far. This is not okay. Like, that's a lot easier to think of. And for that, like, my immediate instinct is to go to characters who are current or former law enforcement or military. So like my first thought was characters like Barry Allen, who's a cop and fairly conservative politically. Hal Jordan, kind of a space cop, also fairly conservative politically. And again, it really depends on the story and whether like they're the main character or like part of an ensemble.
The first one I actually thought of, and granted, I really only know him from the Superman movie, but was Bullcut Green Lantern.
Sure.
Guy Gardner, right?
Also a Republican. Listen, in the 80s, Guy Gardner was a huge Reagan fanboy. Like, that's canon.
Really?
I mean, that was, it was for comic relief. It was because he was being portrayed as an idiot and a jerk. Like, the comics were not pro-Reagan, and that was the point. But yeah, what I will say is that and like there are versions of his story where his dad was a cop, his brother was a corrupt cop. Like there's definitely a lot of that in his background. What I will say is that he would not stand for the masks or the shooting unarmed civilians. Like Green Lanterns do not hold with cowardice. That is a huge part. Like by definition, a Green Lantern is supposed to be without fear. Like, it's part of the ring doesn't work if they have fear. And I feel like, again, both Hal and Guy would work really well in a story where they're like, well, you got to follow the law. Wait, what?
Yeah.
I think they'd both fit really well into that story, especially with Hal, like the Green Lantern, Green Arrow thing. Green Arrow would have very, very loud opinions. He'd be in Minneapolis right now.
I mean, this doesn't come across in the TV show Arrow.
No.
But the Oliver Queen, and I think we see this even in the Justice League cartoon, but especially in the comic books, my understanding is Oliver Queen is kind of the most like liberal hippy-dippy, and I say this as a liberal hippy-dippy myself, person in that world, right?
100%. And for those listening who are reading comics, I highly recommend picking up the current comic, Batman Green Arrow, The Question Arcadia, which is not about this specifically, but is very much about like the Question kind of whistleblowing about abuse of laborers who are being trafficked, and Green Arrow being like, we have to stop this, and Batman being like, I don't know, it seems like they're following the rules. And like Batman does eventually go, oh, they are not following the rules. Okay, let's go punch some people. But I thought it's excellent, and it's very good characterization for all three of them.
Interesting. The Question is another one I want to talk about in more in depth at some point, because I admit I know very little about him, but he seems fascinating to me. And yeah, I think, because one of the first ones that I thought of was some of the more kind of authoritarian of our heroes, and Iron Man being the first, obviously, to come to mind. I think I am an Iron Man defender. We know this. I have some love for him, even though he's a very wounded character, clearly, and has made some mistakes. My thought, though, and again, tell me, I'm just going by MCU, is that the idea of executive power, the idea of democracy is good, but we need to be safe. Those are things that I keep wanting to say RDJ, but no, that's the actor, that Tony Stark would be very okay with, and has been okay with. The suit of armor around the world. Right. I feel like he would be one of the ones who would be kind of on the most against it for different reasons, where he's like, this is so dumb. You're doing this in such a dumb way. This is not helpful. This is not, it's that kind of thing where like authoritarian characters often aren't going to support other authoritarians because they want to have the power themselves. And especially if they watch someone using the power badly, that's going to drive them even more crazy.
Yeah, well, also, just speaking of RDJ, now I'm picturing Doctor Doom being like, "You are doing a terrible job."
Uh-huh.
He would be so annoyed. But yeah, like I mean, again, Iron Man strikes me as a character who I could see in this imaginary story very easily being like, "Oh yeah, he made this proprietary Stark AI that helps identify, uh, undocumented people or whatever, like
Yeah.
undocumented people who have actually committed crimes or who might, based on the
Right.
AI's guesses, potentially commit crimes." Because you have a lot of comics that explore like, um, this isn't the right word, but like anticipatory or proactive justice, where you go after people
Mm-hmm.
before they do something, which
Right.
innocent until proven guilty. So no, that doesn't work. But like I could so easily see that story. And then like Steve or somebody being like, "Oh my God, you have to stop." And him being like, "No, no, I'm keeping people safe," until like that horrible moment where he's like, "Oh no, I've made a terrible mistake," as I
Right.
always do, because as you said, it's kind of how he rolls. But
It's
yeah,
kind of
he
a
fits
shtick.
really easily into that.
Right.
Like, yeah, this all sounds good to me until the tragedy hits.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's almost kind of a naivete that I feel a lot of the times in the people who are supporting what's happening right now, in terms of like, no, because they're all criminals, that's what they're doing it, and that we trust the government, we trust Trump and that kind of thing. And yeah, I see that a lot in the, you know, Iron Man and others like that being like, oh no, I'm sure I can create Ultron, it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be fine, we can keep control of it.
Yeah.
I
I know every time I make a robot, they're evil, but
you know
this time, I got it.
which I will say, this is a big tangent, but is I love the movie Age of Ultron, but it is one of my frustrations because he does, but it works. He creates
Yeah.
Ultron and it's bad, and everyone's like, don't do it again. He's like, I'm going to do it again. They say, don't do it again. He does it again, but it's Vision. So it's okay.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think a big thing with Tony is that he, in his, and again, I'm much more well versed
mm,
in DC characters than Marvel, so I haven't read a ton of his comics, but at least in the movies, and I get the impression this is true in the comics too, he recognizes in his first movie that he has been wrong and that his company has been wrong and they have to change. But I don't think he's ever actually deprogrammed the weapons dealer inside his brain,
yeah.
or the incredible levels of privilege. And I think he's more conscious of the privilege than the weapons dealer. But
Hmm.
like, that's that's his solution to everything. Like,
Right.
that's where he goes to, and that is not the solution to every problem. And that's why so often, like, I literally just finished reading like a massive storyline where the Eternals, who nobody cares about the Eternals, but they were like, let's kill all the mutants. And Tony was like, I don't know. I have a great idea. Why don't we make a god that will stop them from doing that? And then the god was like, I'm going to destroy the earth. And Tony was like,
I might have made a
perhaps
mistake
this went
again.
wrong.
Yeah. I want to go back a bit to also what you're talking about with the masks, because this is DC, but I know it's kind of an otherworld thing. But do you know much? How well versed are you in Watchmen, especially with a TV show that came out a couple years ago?
I didn't watch the show, but I've read the comic, the original,
Okay.
not any of the like sequels or anything.
Well, because I was gonna say I don't know how much this is a part of the original comic. I don't remember it being much in the movie, but I guess it sort of was. But a major theme of the TV show that came out, especially the second season, which I think is just absolutely fantastic, is this idea of the danger of law enforcement wearing masks. And in that, they kind of create this world where you start out being very sympathetic because the police are getting, like, people are going to their homes and attacking their families, and it's terrible. And you understand why they're wearing masks and why they're hiding. And that is the claim as to why ICE is doing it, because they're being doxxed and their families are being harassed and stuff like that. And, like, don't harass people's families, but I do love that restaurants and hotels in my city are like, nope, ICE out. Minnesota, we get ICE out. That's what we do. But But through the course of the show, it really gets into like how like, and I think I'm sure both you and I have massive problems with the idea of the modern police forces in our country, all based in slave catchers and stuff like that. But like that, if there's going to be any kind of organization that has a part in working on public safety, there has to be a level of trust between them and the community that they're working on, and a sense of accountability, and a sense of we are here to help and to protect. And when that doesn't happen, we'll be held accountable, and you will see us and we will see you, and that can't happen with masks. And I think that's something that show really drives home so well. I really recommend people watching it. Excuse me, I'll probably watch it again pretty soon. But yeah, and that I think is just so relevant for where we are right now.
Yeah, I mean, like traditionally, the superhero mask is, and like the emergence of the secret identity as a whole, trope and whatever, is because they're vigilantes. Like,
Right.
yeah, a lot of them wound up being officially deputized. Captain America is like an official, function of the US military and whatever. But for the vast majority of them, like that arises out of vigilantism,
Right.
which again, in these early comics was often in response to,
Corrupt
if not
police
government oppression, then at least legal oppression.
Right.
Whereas, so when law enforcement adopts the practices of vigilantism, something has gone terribly, terribly wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a good way to put it. Now, what about supervillains? You already mentioned Doctor Doom and Magneto, who more and more is becoming kind of an anti-hero. What are other villains that you think would either stand for or stand against what's happening?
Interesting. I mean, I feel like, your sort of billionaire villains would be like, cool, can I profit off of this? Your Lex Luthors, your Kingpins.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are definitely stories. Those are both characters who have been depicted with nuance. So I could see a story where they're like, no, and they speak out against it. But I think the vast majority of that kind of story, like they would just be cashing the check. Like they don't
Right.
care. And certainly there was a recent, like a few years ago, run of Daredevil where Fisk became mayor, which obviously we saw in the TV show, and like perfectly happy to abuse his political power to harm people. Right. Lex was president, and same. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, I
yeah. And at this moment in time, I can easily see Lex as one of the ones who's like, okay, I don't really care about the racism nonsense, but Greenland has all sorts of minerals, so I like this part of the plan. And
oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. He's one of the horrendous billionaire tech bros. Yeah, sucking on the tit of government.
It is funny how many times Lex Luthor, like, as our vision of what the evil rich is, Lex Luthor continually changes to be that each time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which, like, we talked about Superman doing that too. Like they both evolve to fit what we envision evil as.
What are, who I should say, are supervillains you could see who would be standing against this?
I mean, Magneto, but he doesn't exactly count. There's a fair amount of anti-heroes. So like Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn. Right. I don't know that they would be that motivated, but like if it happened where they were, like they're not going to travel.
Right.
But, they're not like getting in the car.
Yeah, I feel like they're both also on the kind of anarchist, like, we just don't want, big government nonsense.
Yeah. Like they care more about protecting what they love and the people in their orbit and like vulnerable people. So like Ivy is really protective of children. So if you have ICE agents, harassing a daycare, those ICE agents are going to find themselves dangling from vines very quickly.
Right. That makes sense.
Trying to think of other like big name supervillains.
I was reading somewhere that Joker apparently like hates Nazis with a passion. Is that a thing, or is that just kind of like a joke that's come about?
I feel like I vaguely know what you're talking about. I could see there being like a random comic where he's like, I mean, I'm evil, but I hate Nazis, and it's like the
Right.
punchline, but it's not like a consistent part of his characterization or anything.
Okay, that makes sense.
I just don't see how it would come up all that often.
Right.
I mean, you got Two-Face, 50% chance of him going either way.
Yeah.
I think somebody like Ra's al Ghul would be interesting. Yeah. Again, could go in many different directions, and certainly, like, I see a lot. I have a hard time picturing a lot of villains who would step in an altruistic way, but I can picture a number of villains who would be like, I'm going to intervene, but also I'm getting something out of this. I will say, like, the Flash rogues, I think, would largely be like if this happened in Central City, they would be like, absolutely not, because they're just
Captain Cold
robbers.
Is not letting this happen.
No, Captain Cold is not standing for this.
Yeah. No, I definitely like that. And I think that there's, as I'm thinking about it, Ra's al Ghul is definitely one of them. That there's a number of villains where I think one of the things that they often want is chaos. And so, like, in part, I think part of why we're wrestling with this a little bit is because the actions of our actual government, our actual world, feel so comical and feel so like comic book villain in that sort of like not a well-developed villain, but in just a silly over-the-top way. But it does feel like a lot of villains that we talk about, they will support governments doing things not because they want that thing to be done, but because they know it's going to lead to instability. They know it's going to lead to chaos. They know it's going to lead to civil war. And that's what they want. And that definitely seems like a Ra's al Ghul thing a lot of the times, and some others for sure.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you said about like, the actions of so many of our government, so many in the administration, and so many affiliated with the administration who don't have real jobs in them, Elon Musk, like are so over the top comic book supervillainy. Like, as a writer, this is something I genuinely struggle with, where like I'll have people read like manuscripts and be like, why is this villain doing this? And I'm like, because he's greedy and hateful. And they're like, I just feel like he needs more nuance. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll think about it. Like, I'll work on that. And then I read the news and I'm like, why do I have to make a 3-dimensional villain when I have these cackling Saturday morning cartoon villains, like literally looting my country, like looting our taxes, and Venezuela's oil, and like it's, and
wanting to invade telling Norway that we're going to invade Greenland because Norway didn't give him the Nobel Peace Prize.
The Nobel Peace. I mean, if like even 10 years ago, even after the 2016 election, I mean, of course, during the lead up to that election and after the election, there were many people who were like, "Oh, you're exaggerating. It'll be fine," which is like, will it? But even then, if you described what was happening now, and I don't necessarily mean like, I actually think I probably would have believed what's happening in Minneapolis, but like the level of sheer like idiotic incompetence and like just like the tariffs, the like all the things that happen just because they literally don't know the definitions of words, or like inviting reporters to a signal chat, like all of this is like, no, this you need to rewrite this. This is not plausible. I don't believe this in this season of America.
On a similar note, one of the other podcasts I'm involved with, the Marvel Movie Minute, we're getting ready to do our minute-by-minute breakdown of Captain America: Winter Soldier. I recently did Thor: The Dark World, and I did not invite you to be a part of that because I respect you. But this one I think would be a fun one to talk about.
Yes.
And I realized, on my recent plane trip, I watched that movie again to kind of get myself back up for it. And I remembered that the first time I saw it, I liked it. But part of my problem was it felt too obvious. It felt like, come on, like all of a sudden, thousands of people are going to be just murdered by these helicarriers, but it's going to be okay because everyone's like, no, they were terrorists. They had these bad ideas. They're going to be like bad people. And I was like, I don't believe that. That's a little bit simplistic writing. And now I look at the real world, I'm like, oh, no, that's exactly what's happening.
2014 was a simpler, more innocent time.
It really was. It really was.
Except they don't have anybody smart enough to make a helicarrier.
Yeah, yeah. So at least we've got that going for us. All right. Well, we could probably go on, and there's a lot of people we're going to say, yeah, of course they'd be against this, because mostly people are smart in comic books, and yeah. But is there any last person you want to bring up who might be a surprise to people, but you think would be definitely against this or for it?
Well, you did say we were going to talk about the Punisher.
Sure, let's do it.
Well, what are your thoughts?
So, and let me frame. Sure, and let me just frame this by saying, part of where this controversy comes from is that, Punisher is obviously a vigilante, and he's kind of a version of Batman, but without Batman's rules about killing, and who is in some ways has some altruistic motivations, but also is very much seeking revenge for the people who killed his family. And that both directly in season 1 of the show and in a lot of the comics, but then also in the kind of like, I want to get the kind of people who did this to me, And that's also in I want to make sure they don't do it to other people, et cetera, et cetera. But because he is I'm going to torture people, I'm going to kill people, I'm going to have no remorse, no mercy, by those elements of law enforcement who are mad that, as they see it, the woke people are making them be nice to criminals and stuff like that, and keep saying like, oh, that was not okay, that was too abusive, or that was too violent, or that was not a person you should have shot. A lot of those cops have adopted Punisher as their kind of person. It's like, no, look, they're criminals, they're bad guys. Why can't we mow them down the way that Punisher does? And the author of Punisher, to my understanding, has been very, very clear that is completely wrong. That
Jerry Conway, yeah.
Yeah. So say more about that, about what he has said and where he feels Punisher stands.
I mean, I don't have the direct quote handy, but Jerry Conway has definitely come out and said that, like, no, the Punisher would not be okay with killer cops, like, because what the Punisher is against criminals, and when a cop breaks the law, they then become a criminal. Like,
right.
By definition, it's not. Criminals are not like a separate category. I mean, even though like a lot of Punisher comics kind of talk about them in that way, like if you do wrong, if you break the law, if you harm people, he's coming for you. And like, he's not so hung up on like the letter of the law, if you do like horrendous things that are totally legal, he's coming for you. And yeah, the idea that like, it's that he would approve of law enforcement having carte blanche to kidnap and beat and kill whoever they want. No, like, I get he's another character who I'm like, I don't think he'd go out of his way, but I could see the story where he's like passing through and then he's the Punisher. So he kills a lot of people who expect him to be on their side. And then he's like, his comics often have like, war journal, like his like narration boxes are like war journal day 4,907, I'm on the road again. And then you just see him like on his motorcycle or in his van or whatever. Like it's not he's not like you said, his mission is one of revenge, so this is not, he's not going to get involved in politics, but if it comes to his doorstep, or if he comes to its doorstep, he's going to act as he sees fit, and then he's going to move along.
Right. Because my understanding has always been, and granted, I know much more about Batman than about him, but that he's another one of these people, because it seems there's a contradiction, because clearly he is breaking the law right, left, and center in what he's doing. But that there's a sort of sense of, I'm going after the people who fall through the cracks, that the legal system, like, he would be very happy in a world where he didn't have to. Well, I guess no, because he's driven more by the personal revenge. So
yeah, he needs enrichment. He wouldn't be happy in a world with no one to kill. He'd be so bored.
Yeah. I mean, and it's okay if there's just kind of a hypocrisy there of the like, I want the police to follow, the law, but I'm not going to.
I mean, ultimately, it's a very silly and incoherent
Yeah.
morality and like he's a very silly character. There's a bit in a like a throwaway joke. I think it's a footnote in an issue of Squirrel Girl where he cameos, and it's like, it's the Punisher. You can tell he's really serious because he screen prints a skull on all of his t-shirts.
Yeah.
It's like, ultimately he's very silly, which, I mean, Batman is also similar to what we were saying about Iron Man. These are all characters who are very much like, I can do whatever I want and it's right because I feel like it.
Yeah.
Like, that's the place that they're operating from. And Frank Castle doesn't have the excuse of growing up rich, but I think we can explain why Bruce Wayne and Tony Stark are like that. They have butlers.
Yeah. That's really the case. That's the path to evil. You have a butler.
Yeah.
So
my other thought, tangential to the Punisher, is I do think that Daredevil would have very strong opinions, but I think that we need Daredevil a lot less than we need Matt Murdock.
Yes, I think it's very true. I think the legal fight, like, to me, Matt Murdock would be the one who, Daredevil might fight a couple of ICE agents to be able to do this, but like Daredevil's the one who'd be like, okay, I'm going to go gather all the evidence from the shooting of Renee Good that the feds aren't allowing us to investigate, and like, show up at a judge with like, look, here's all the evidence that the cop did commit murder.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's called That Video We All Saw.
Yeah. So, hard to tell. All right. Well, Jessica, as always, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. I really hope that you... I do like a well-written villain, but I've been convinced that they don't have to be in the real world. So whenever you get us some writing about your villains that have better or worse motivations than those in the real world, I want to read them. Our listeners want to read them.
Thank you.
But for now, as I said before, check out Stone Sword Table with a story by Jessica. Of course, check out all my other podcasts. This one, Star Wars Generations, Once and Future Parent, although that's going to be going through some transition in a little bit, and Marvel Movie Minute. On behalf of both of us, thank you all so much. Fuck ICE.